Welcome back to Peek into COS. This episode is brought to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast at The Next Us, a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in downtown Colorado Springs. Today, we'd like to welcome Bob Chastain, President and CEO of the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Doug.
Nice to have you here. So I thought about it, and like, how do we start? And I thought, well, we could do lions and tigers and bears.
Yeah.
And we could do giraffes and elephants and penguins. Oh,
yep.
My. I mean, let's just have some fun telling people a little bit about the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. So you started there, what, in high school?
It seems like it. I've been there 28 years, and 18 as the CEO, so closing in on 30, and I've seen just unbelievable changes in those nearly 30 years.
Because the zoo is how old?
We celebrate our 100th year anniversary in 2026.
2026, so it's
Yep.
coming up.
Yeah.
100 years.
And we have some amazing things in store for people. So
well,
we're thrilled.
we'll get into that, but I'm really intrigued in 1995.
Yeah.
What did you start doing there, and why? Why did you start at the zoo?
Yeah, it's odd. I started my zoo career in kind of an unorthodox way. I was in wildlife science, studying that in school.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first person in my family to go to college and finish college. And so partway through my wildlife career, I realized you have to work a lot of seasonal jobs to be able to study grizzly bears in the wild or that sort of thing. That's what I always thought I would do.
Yep.
Somewhere along the line, I realized that maybe I didn't want to go to college all those years, and my parents wouldn't be super happy if I worked a bunch of seasonal jobs. So I switched next door to horticulture, which kind of is the care of plants.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew that I didn't want to be in my own business because my family all run their own business, and I know how hard that is to be a small business owner. It's just, I don't think people understand the hours that those people pour into that and the pressure that they feel. So then I switched to horticulture, worked in that field for a number of years, but really it was my professor who said, "You don't seem to know what you want to do with your life. You like plants, you like animals." The Indianapolis Zoo is moving locations. So they picked up their entire zoo and moved to another location, and I started working there. I was very reluctant at first because zoos weren't always as modern and as nice as they are today. But I've fallen in love with the people and the animals ever since. I went back to get my master's degree, and the way the world works small is I had rock climbed with a person. We were climbing a crack called the Bastille Crack in El Dorado Canyon, and he fell and broke his ankle. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we didn't have cell phones or anything, so I didn't hear from him for like 3 years, and he called me out of the blue and said, "I've become the horticulturist at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. I'm leaving. You should apply for my job."
Wow.
And I don't even know how he found. Back then, I don't know how he found my number.
Wow. Yeah.
I had my first computer that year, so like I don't know how he found me, except he'd probably call your parents' old number and they tell you how to get a hold of them.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
There's probably somebody listening to this podcast who is a young person who has a passion for animals.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure you get asked this, Bob, but what advice would you give a young person who's really thinking about finding a career in working, be it in horticulture, be it in the zoo, be it with animals of some kind? What advice would you give them?
We do get asked that a lot, and I guess what I would say, and I coached my own kids in the same way. I don't know whether it was successful, but I'll just draw on that. There's a book called Strengths Finders, and it kind of tells you what you're good at. But within that, you might sound like you're really good at administration skills, but maybe you would hate doing it at a hospital and you'd love doing it at a zoo, or you'd hate doing it at a zoo and you'd love doing it at a computer place.
Yeah.
So what I would say to people is there's a million types of animal careers, from dog groomers to professional zoo people to there are people that we know in our world that only specialize in animal behavior. So based on that, where's your interest lie? – And then be prepared for the long haul. Pursue it with such vigor. But then I would give them this bit of optimism. I finished my master's degree, came to the zoo as a horticulturalist, started taking on all new responsibilities, and within 10 years I was the CEO. So that work that you put in on the front end eventually accumulates, where I think I have a theory that about every 5 years a person could radically reinvent themselves. That's about how long it would take to radically reinvent themselves. And so it's, when you're in the middle of it, it feels like it's a long haul.
Yeah.
And then, as you know, when you reach that, it feels like it happened overnight.
That's great. Well, and I imagine that you're probably one of those people who feels like you haven't worked a day in your life as it relates to, you know, the passion and doing that. So let's help listeners understand a little bit about what a special place the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is. First of all, you know, it's special for both our residents and for our visitors.
Right.
You have continuously been ranked amongst the top zoos in the country.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but before I got here in 2010, my wife and I were over in Sydney, Australia, and we were at the Sydney Zoo.
Oh, I've been there. It's one of my favorites.
Well, we already knew that we were coming here to interview for this job at Visit Colorado Springs. And there were people behind us in line talking about the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know. And my wife looked at me and she said, it's a sign.
Yeah.
it's a sign that this could be something special. So
I can't tell you how many times that has happened to me. It once happened to me in an airplane.
Is that right?
Where I was in the galley, it was a long flight, and ran into someone talking about the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo.
I love it. Well, tell people what it really means to be like America's Mountain Zoo, and what's so unique about the experience.
Yeah, I think what's unique is, one of the things I've had the good fortune to do is to travel to many zoos around the world. And I would say the people of Colorado should know that the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is one of the most unique properties. We don't tend to want to compare ourselves to other zoos, but if you just thought about the experience of the views and experience of the days, the reason Sydney Zoo, for example, is so great is you're right across from the Opera House there. I mean, the views are spectacular on the harbor. The Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is, to our knowledge, the highest zoo in North America, one of the highest in the world. We have this unique ability to see out over Colorado Springs. You can see almost all of it from the zoo. It really is a special place. One of our main objectives that we wrote down for ourselves when we started thinking about, we're having some success, we should write down our recipe for success. Number one was that we should never take the natural beauty of the mountain for granted. And it's hard to overcome sometimes when you're in construction and you tend to want to flatten everything. But man, when you step back and you realize, hey, we don't need to flatten it, it's part of the beauty.
Yeah.
Some pretty magical things have happened at the zoo.
Well, and we talk to people about what it means to be at like 6,500 feet.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, for us, that's kind of ground level here.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the elevation gain at the zoo and what that's like for.
That's funny. My wife and I walked from the Broadmoor area to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo last weekend, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's way steeper. And then I got to the zoo and it got even steeper. So,
right.
I mean, we do have a road that goes through the zoo.
Yep.
Historically, obviously, the founder was Spencer Penrose. He's buried up in the shrine up above the zoo. So we have a road that goes through that's very steep. The Run to the Shrine is a popular event that we have. And it's just so steep that when I got in the zoo, I was like, oh my gosh. So there's no way that we're going to flatten that out.
Right.
We do, every exhibit we build is ADA accessible from the beginning of that exhibit to the end. So we have all these flat spaces linked by these really steep hills now.
Sure. I can't think of anybody better than you to paint a picture from an expectation standpoint of when somebody comes into the zoo. I mean, we'll talk about exhibits, but one of the things that people, if they've never been there before, would not know anything about is Quarters for Conservation.
Yeah.
And, even if you've been to the zoo, I'll let you describe the program and let people know how that works. But then also, like, what happens to the money after they put their quarter in? So let's talk about that, then we'll talk about animals.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating because I just got an email today. There's a group of CEOs who were, it was not uncommon for CEOs to spend 30 or 40 or maybe even 50 years at a single institution if you'd go back just one half generation, 20 years or something like that. There was a group of CEOs we called the silverbacks at that time.
Okay.
And one of them reached out to me today and said, congratulations on your $5 million in Quarters for Conservation. I know that you helped start that program. And I answered back, it's one of the things that I'll think is most powerful when I leave.
Legacy, yeah.
So in a nutshell, here's what it is. We have to give credit to where credit's due. The genesis of the idea came from a guy at the Oregon Zoo, that Tony Vecchio, who started it for a while, and then my friend Steve Burns tried it at Zoo Boise. When we got ready to start it, we always want to try to figure out how do we blow things up and make it as big as we possibly can.
Sure.
So when we started it, we also asked a number of other zoos to start it with us. And the concept is simple, that every visit you make to the zoo will directly benefit wildlife. Mm-hmm. In our case, it's a quarter at a time. A quarter at a time you would think that is not going to add up that much, but when the attendance has grown from, say, 400,000 to we had near 900,000 one year, that's a lot of quarters. They add up. I remember taking 5-gallon buckets full of quarters to a conference and spilling them all over the floor as part of a gag act to show people how many quarters we were starting to make. So
that's great.
We had so much success with that. Now guests come in, they get to hear about the projects, they get to read about them, and they get to vote. So they start their visit knowing it's really directly benefiting wildlife. We've picked a number of partners that we've vetted. So we do that hard work of vetting who's going to use the money well. And Rachel and I were just talking about a group. Their main job is in Africa. There's elephants who have tusks that go all the way to the ground. When you and I were kids, we would have seen them on films on animal. We didn't have Animal Planet back then.
No, Nat Geo.
Nat Geo. We would have seen those tusks go all the way to the ground. There's hardly any of those left in the world. This company, this organization has made it their job to protect those. We support those. And we're on our way to giving that one organization $750,000.
Wow. That's fabulous.
And what they do with that is everything from use airplane hours to surveil poaching to they have huge community outreach, including a clinic that they built there. So we're very clear that you have to include people in conservation work. So it's about the animals and it's about the people living with those animals.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the animals and talk about some of the amazing exhibits of what people can expect as they kind of wind their way through our zoo.
For your benefit, I would like to say this. The people of Colorado Springs may not understand how lucky they are to have a zoo that has such a broad sampling of the charismatic animals. So you think about elephants and giraffes and think about big cats. We have lions and we have tigers and we have snow leopards and Amur leopards and mountain lions. So we have a lot of the big charismatic animals. So if you're a child growing up in Colorado Springs and you want to see what some animals look like that you've read about or seen on the TV, you're likely to see those. When the zoo was a very small zoo, it still had a great collection, but not every community enjoys such a good collection. Now, of course, the bigger cities obviously have many of the bigger animals, but there are some smaller zoos that the largest animal that they might have is like a lynx.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And we have lots of other animals larger than a lynx.
I won't ask you to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
But when you think about the most popular attractions where there's a little bit of a line, and to the point where I understand that not only do you have members, but you obviously have non-members, but everybody has to have an admission ticket, advance reservation, if you will.
Yep.
So talk about A, why that is important, but B, what is it when they come inside that are the ones that are just so memorable?
Let me hit the ticket thing first.
Yeah.
So two things happen when you come to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. One is you help conservation. It took us a long time, a quarter at a time, to get to $1 million. Our board was so excited about that. The community staff was so excited. We increased that to 75 cents. That's why people get 3 voting tokens the shape of a quarter when they come in the zoo now. Mm-hmm. It's about every 18 months to 24 months we raise $1 million. So that wheel is really going. So if you want to help wildlife and you don't know how, just come to the zoo. Have a good day.
Yep.
Because we'll do that on your behalf.
Sure.
In terms of the rest of that ticket price, though, there's about 2,500 to 3,000 licenses in the United States to have exotic animals. Okay. So if you want to have a tiger anywhere in the United States, you have to have one of those licenses, whether it's private or whether it's public, like the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is. Of that, there's about 300 of those that are accredited. So let's say 10%. Of that, there's about 10 that run without tax support. Most zoos are run with some form of tax support. Mm-hmm. So the dollars you pay to come into the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, to buy food, to buy a gift, all of that, go directly into running the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. Further, we're really unique in the fact that I, again, came from a small business background. Mm-hmm. Well, my family did. I tried to stay out of that. We try to run our operation based on what we can earn. That means if you gave me $1 for the next capital campaign because you liked giraffes and you wanted to help us build a building, all of that would go. We don't take any overhead out of that. So the ticket price is a magical thing for us. I mean, it is how we support ourselves. In terms of the broad variety of animals that you, whether favorite or interesting animals, where are the lines? Here's what I observe. Obviously, giraffes are a huge favorite. Yeah. We're getting ready to make a huge investment into our giraffe program where we probably won't have the biggest giraffe exhibit, the biggest giraffe barn in the world, but we'll have one of the nicest giraffe barns in the world. And that's not an exaggeration. I spent the last 2 years traveling around the world seeing who's doing the best work. Okay. And so giraffes are obviously huge. Some odd ones, the grizzly bears, they're just like, people love them. And when the talk that the keepers give is just all the way packed full, to the fact that we're going to try to make a little bit of bigger space for that public talk. Penguins are small but amazing. Like, they come out on the path and I just see people stand there and be engaged with them. One of the few places where you can come in and see penguins walking on the same path as you do. They get to go on walkabout every now and again. I could go on and on. There's a number of, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple things that you wouldn't imagine. I've had colleagues from all over the world come to the zoo, and our domestic goats do this thing where you put food in a can at the bottom, and then they use a wheel, a bicycle wheel, to bring the can up to them. And it's one of the most favorite things that my colleagues see. And then right next to that, there's a whole bunch of small animals in a building we call the loft. And I hear from our donors and friends all the time that they had really awesome experiences with those small animals. So it's a pretty broad spectrum at the zoo. Yeah,
it really is. And then we want listeners to know it's year-round, okay? Yep. So, people look at the weather in Colorado Springs and they kind of wonder sometimes, but absolutely it's a year-round. And you also have you've got camps and you've got VIP experiences. And,
right.
And, I've fed the hippos. I mean, there's some really, really cool things that you can do. So let people know a little bit about some of those special things that they can sign.
Yeah, I mean, might break that down into a few categories.
Sure.
I mean, let's start with events, for example. One of the things that we started noticing a few years ago is that the normal zoo visitor has changed. And at least one way they have changed is now about 40% of our people come without kids. So I think for a long time, people thought it was a place you took your kids.
Yeah, sure.
And because of that, we do things like over 21 events now so that people can be exposed to the animals. Because for us, the diversity is all about a couple things. Diversity of thought. We want to have lots of smart thought partners on things. And then we know that the world is so diverse that if animals are going to stand any chance in the wild, that we need to be able to reach large numbers of populations. So over 21's a big thing for us. We do the Run to the Shrine, which is kind of a big fitness event for us. We do all kinds of camps, which let's not call that a special event for a second, because I think that might be a separate category. But what we really try to do with our events, Dog Days is one that's getting ready to come up. You might have, we heard from a lady who said, I always kind of wanted to come to the zoo, but I never come because I don't want to come alone. And we did Dog Days, and she brought her dog. And so she didn't have to come alone because her dog was her family member. And
so that's a special day because normally
that's a special day.
I was going to say, yeah, because normally animals are.
We have a target of doing at least one of those days a month.
Okay.
Through the nicer season.
Sure. Okay.
We tend to do it for part of a day. We tend to do it the least part of the day that we think it would be concerning for our other guests or concerning for our animals, which our animals find it as an enrichment. So that's really a non-issue. It's more about congestion in the zoo.
Okay. I know that you are an all-weather venue.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm just curious, what's it like? Today's not a great day here. We're recording this in the middle of the winter, and today's kind of as one of those days. But what is it like for the animals in extreme weather conditions?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, people believe that animals in the wild. I have a friend who says people believe animals in the wild are like sitting around the campfire, roasting s'mores, singing songs. They're not. They're like fighting for every meal that they have. They're fighting to survive. They're fighting to raise young. It is not an easy thing. You translate that over to wild animals, and we make a special effort to try to care for them in a way that sort of honors their wild background. But they, like us, on super cold days, sometimes they don't want to go outside. And so we have a kind of a series of things. On very nice days, though, it'll be go outside and play kind of days. On some days, it's access sort of days. They can go in or out at their choosing. And then it's really cold or something like that, or really severe weather, then we could lock them in their building to keep them safe.
Sure.
So most of our animals do really well. Like by way of example, we have tropical animals that really need to stay above 70 or 80 degrees all the time. And then we have tigers who seemingly the colder and snowier it gets, the better they are.
Yeah.
They're from Siberia, and so
sure,
they're used to that weather.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I just had a great tiger experience the other day.
Did you?
In the evening when it was getting dark and cold, tiger didn't care at all. He was out just walking around looking at stuff.
I love that. Let me... Before we begin to wrap up, I need to take just a quick break and give a shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which is our favorite small airport, the Colorado Springs Airport. There's something about our airport that drives travelers wild. Maybe it's the friendly customer service, the stress-free security process, or the laid-back vibe. Whatever it is, it's easy to see why so many people are falling in love with Colorado's small airport. So go ahead, fly COS, and see what all the fuss is all about. All right, as we begin to wrap, we've got a few questions that we like to ask. And
let me just say that TSA at our airport is the nicest in the world. I can't even believe I would say those words, and I told them that the last time I was there.
That's great. No, we are very spoiled here in Colorado Springs with our airport.
We are.
And it's getting even better. They're
I
making
agree.
some improvements, so we're excited about that. Okay, so Bob, you've lived here a long time.
Yeah.
In 3 words, how would you describe Colorado Springs?
Beautiful would have to be one.
Mm-hmm.
For me, adventurous.
Yep.
I don't know how to say this in one word, so I'm just going to say a place you'd want to live.
A place you'd want to live. Sure, sure. Well, we talk about today's tourist is tomorrow's talent.
Yeah.
That so many people do come here to a visit.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, we find them here. All right. What is your favorite hidden gem anywhere in the Pikes Peak region?
I think one on the short list
Okay.
would be Cheyenne Mountain State Park for mountain biking.
Yeah.
It's oddly uncrowded,
Yeah.
and it's such a minor annual fee,
Right.
and it gives you access to lots of trails without much crowding.
Yep. This is right across from the main gate into Fort Carson, and it's a very special place.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Good choice. All right. Do you still have something on your bucket list that you want to do in the Pikes Peak region that you haven't done?
Yeah. Are you talking about on a personal level?
Yeah.
Oh, man. There's like 1,000 rivers that I still want to fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's tons of motorcycle trails I still want to ride. I've lived here nearly 30 years, and I just do not even feel like I've scratched the surface of the area around us.
That's something else. Yeah, that's just an indication for those of you that are listening of what a special place this really is to live and to work and to play. We're very, very fortunate. All right, so for visitors and residents who may be listening to make their plans and how do they get all the information? Where do they go to website, follow you on social? Where do you point them?
Well, I don't follow social media, so I don't point them anyway. I do give them my business card sometimes, which has my personal cell phone number on it. But we do have an amazing website and social media team. They're on all the normal platforms.
Yep.
We're easy to find. We have a team that is really dedicated to having a personal connection with all of those people that write in. People are surprised that we try to answer almost all of the questions, field all of the comments, deal with all of the people who have concerns about things. And so our team is really fantastic at that. And we have a commitment to turning out new information all the time on those normal social media channels. And I think people like that because you can't have enough cute animals in your life, apparently.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Well, so cmzoo.org.
That's right.
Is the homepage, if you will, for our Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. And it's hands down, it should be a part of everybody's itinerary, no matter how many days you're staying in the region. Be sure and include the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in your travel plans. Bob Chastain, thanks for joining me today.
You're very welcome.
And making it special, and hopefully we'll have more and more visitors that'll come up and see you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.